Madam Speaker, I support the amended motion. The White Paper and the debate are the culmination of a year-long process. We've consulted stakeholders, we've published occasional papers, issues papers, we've engaged many Singaporeans, we've received feedback from thousands of people and distilled all these strands into the White Paper, laid out the issues comprehensively and what we need to do to address these issues. The White Paper has triggered some strong reactions, which MPs have reflected in this House. Some are upset that we are talking about long-term problems before solving immediate issues. Many fear that the way we are going, Singapore will no longer be Singaporean, that we'll be overwhelmed by immigrants and foreigners. And many MPs raise this. Many people have objected to the figure of 6.9 million. And hence the passionate and the difficult debate in this House this week. Why has the government introduced this White Paper now, or even introduced this White Paper at all, knowing that population and immigration is such a difficult and unpopular subject? Because I know that we, all Singaporeans, we face a very difficult problem together that's growing day by day. And as your government, it's our duty to share this problem with you. We are producing too few babies, our society is aging, and if we do nothing, our population will soon start shrinking, like Japan's. What does that mean for all of us? What must we do about it? And when I say we, I don't just mean the government, I mean also individuals, groups, companies, SMEs. How do we prepare ourselves? How do we try to avert some of the problems which we can see coming? We have to make choices, make adjustments, accept trade-offs which will fundamentally impact our country, our society, our children, our lives. For example, do we allow SMEs, more foreign workers, to grow their businesses? Or choke them off and force them to upgrade or die? Do we let in construction workers to build more HDB flats and MRT lines faster? Or do we cap the number of construction workers and make Singaporeans wait longer for HDB flats and MRT trains? So the discussions last year, and so the White Paper and this debate, so that we are upfront with Singaporeans and we can face our challenges together. It would have been easy for me to kick the can down the road, to borrow a phrase from the Workers' Party, and leave the problem to a future government or a future Prime Minister. Or to propose a bogus solution which doesn't really solve the problem but buys you some political time. For example, declare that we're setting KPIs for our TFR. And then by the time you find out that nothing has happened, well, perhaps the awkward moment has passed. But it would be irresponsible for me to do so, and I hope Singaporeans understand why, after considering this carefully, we've decided to bring the matter out into the open and discuss this sincerely, openly, frankly, even if you may not agree with the proposals or the solutions which we have put out. Our purpose is to do the best for Singaporeans. The Singaporeans are at the center of all of our plans, and everything which we do is to improve Singaporeans' well-being, their security, our welfare. And everything else, whether it's economic growth, whether it's population policy, whether it's your housing, your trains, those are means to this end. This White Paper is not just a discussion of a difficult problem. It's really an affirmation of faith in Singapore's future. Belief that Singapore has a future which is worth building, protecting, striving for. Belief that Singapore can grow from strength to strength and that next generation deserves to live better lives than this generation. All human beings have this desire to build on what you have inherited, to pass on to your children something better than what you had. And I think Singaporeans share this deep human desire. They want to do this individually, in their families. They want to do it in their work. We want to do it collectively as a society. We want tomorrow to be better than today. Otherwise, why are we striving? And to make tomorrow better than today, we have to get our population policies right so that we give ourselves the best chance of success. This is a long-term issue. Tomorrow against today, it's a small difference. Next year versus this year, it's noticeable. 10 years from now compared to today, the trends have built up and accumulated. Another 10 years, they've become irreversible. Therefore, we cannot wait till a convenient moment. We have to work hard to address the problems, to address the long-term problems at the same time as we are addressing the current problems, which preoccupy Singaporeans. Whether it's housing, aggressively building HDB flats, as Minister Khaw Boon Wan has tirelessly been explaining and doing. Whether it's transport, accelerating the construction of train lines, bringing in more bus services, and spreading out peak hours, as Minister Lui Tak Yew has also tirelessly been doing. Whether it's job competition, reducing our reliance on non-Singaporeans, helping our workers to upgrade, ensuring fair treatment for citizens, as Tan Chuan Jin, Acting Minister, has been working at and explaining to you. Or tackling the cost of living and social safety nets for our lower income groups especially, through many schemes, whether it's Workfare, Comcare, and other schemes also to help not so low income groups, but people who may have fallen into difficulties temporarily and who have exceptional circumstances, who deserve support, like families who need to hire foreign domestic workers to look after bedridden seniors. And we have schemes, we have arrangements, and we are developing more ways of doing these things. But progressively, step by step, whether it's houses, whether it's trains, whether it's cost of living, we are determined to improve things progressively. But in parallel, we have to deal with this population issue. This is a multifaceted problem. First, it's a problem of numbers. How many babies are born? How many people immigrate? How many people emigrate? How many foreign workers we need? What is our TFR? At that level is an exercise in spreadsheets and arithmetic. Anybody can do the sums. Doesn't mean anybody can make the sums work and solve the problem. But that is only one aspect of our population problem. Another aspect is identity. Many MPs have spoken about it. I think just now Professor Eugene Tan was one of them. Who are we? Through our children, through immigrants, through people who are working here, people who are visiting here. Who are Singaporeans? It's more complicated for us because we are a cosmopolitan city. Unlike, say, Japan, or unlike, say, China, where the population all look the same, speak the same language, and it's quite clear if you are Japanese, you are Japanese. But in Singapore, who are you? We have to be open, we have to be varied, we have to have all sorts of people here. But at the same time, we are not just a city. We are not just like New York or like London. We are a nation. And so we need both that vibrancy and openness, but also the sense of identity and the sense of belonging among citizens, that we are Singaporeans together. And that is a very difficult combination to create. To be cohesive without being closed, to identify with one another and not be xenophobic, to be open and yet not to be diluted and dissolved. But that is our karma, and we have to keep a balance between the two. The third aspect of the population issue is the economy. How do we keep thriving and prospering? I almost hesitate to make this argument because everybody in the chamber, or so it sounded, or many people in this chamber, and many people outside too, have taken the view that economics is not so important and that we have overemphasized economics as a government. And I think I should make my position quite clear. We are not pursuing growth at all costs. We are trying to juggle many different objectives, including population, including cohesion, including our social tensions. And we are trading off, reducing immigration, reducing foreign worker inflows, slowing down the economy significantly, so as to deal with these tensions and pressures, and so as to address other issues which we want, whether it's quality of life, whether it's income equality, whether it's the environment. We accept this because we want the growth to be sustainable, we want high quality growth, and we want workers and families to benefit. Finally, it's for Singaporeans. Growth is not for its own sake. But growth is not unimportant. We can only afford to say that it is not, doesn't matter, because we have already got it. If we didn't have it, we wouldn't be so blasé. You need growth to improve education and healthcare, to build better homes and towns, to invest in reliable and convenient public transport. If you don't have the resources, you will not have the means, and you will not have that quality of life. We also need growth to improve incomes. And I say this advisedly. Incomes are important. If you are in the top 5, 10% of the population, you may say, well, I have enough. I manage. I can live within my means. If you are at the bottom 10, 20% of the population, or even the median Singaporean, not poor, not rich, I think it would be patronizing and cavalier for us to say they don't need more. Growth is unimportant. It is important for us to raise the income of the low-income Singaporeans. It is important that we are able to have growth which enables a broad mass of Singaporeans to improve their lives. And when people say that the cost of living is high, I want help with cost of living, really the best solution is if your incomes can go up and you have more means to afford the things which you want, then you will be under less pressure. But for the incomes to grow up, unless the economy grows, I must rob Peter to pay Paul. And somebody has to volunteer, take the money from me, give it to them. And it is not a sustainable solution. Our experience has shown that, in fact, when the economy is growing, the low-income Singaporeans get benefit. Their incomes go up. When the economy crashes or slows down, it's the low-income Singaporeans whose salaries stagnate. And at the top, quite often, incomes continue to rise. It's a problem with us. It's a problem with many countries. And so, that is why, although we have many objectives, and we are trading off, growth still counts. Next to, together with sense of belonging and nationhood, together with work-life balance, together with family-friendly environment, one of the things we must not forget is we need to make a living for ourselves. So when I think about population and the future, we are trying to look at it from different perspectives. But finally, we are trying to look at it, how does it affect Singaporeans? And which Singaporeans are going to be affected when you're talking about population? I think there are three groups which I'd specifically like to mention. First, the older people. Older Singaporeans, not just today's old people, which you can see and are not so few already, but tomorrow's Singaporeans. That means some of us who are here today who still consider ourselves approaching middle age, but in 18 years' time, 2030, we will say, well, this is the new 50. And that is a very big group of Singaporeans. The numbers are growing rapidly because we are the baby boomers. The bulge of kids born after the Second World War. And I can see this on the ground. All MPs can see this on the ground. In Teck Ghee, when I first became an MP, I used to attend a lot of baby shows. Today there are still baby shows once in a while, but far more senior citizen activities. And just last weekend, I opened a senior activity center. Very popular, lots of old folks playing bingo, exercising, socializing, asking for more facilities. That's the face of Singapore tomorrow. What do we do with it? Today there are 6 working citizens looking after supporting one senior citizen. By 2030, without immigration, if we freeze everything and just depend on the citizens, it's going to be 2 to 1. That means the burden, the responsibility on each working age person is going to triple. We have to look after the seniors. Yes, they have the CPF. That's very helpful. Yes, the government is there with HDB schemes and with MediSave Senior, MediFund Senior, and with all sorts of schemes to help the senior citizens look after themselves. But finally, you also need an economy which works. You also need the young people to provide the services to look after them. As an MP, I see many old folks who have no children, or whose children are not supporting them for one reason or another. And they come to me and they ask me for help. And I say, well, what about your family? He says, my family, so many reasons. I've lost touch with them. Or, young people these days. Sometimes the family is helping. The family comes to see us. And they don't have a very easy time. Because they have aged parents, they have young children. And they're trying hard to be filial sons and daughters. Not so easy looking after parents, children, and work. Sometimes looking after siblings who have special needs. With healthcare expenses, caregivers, feeling emotional stress. We are doing a great deal to help them. With MediFund Silver, active aging programs, barrier-free neighborhoods, all the many schemes which we are coordinating through all our different ministries. But that's today 6 to 1 support ratio. When it goes to 2 young people to 1, I think the pressures on the family and on the society are going to be much higher. It's easy to say we stop immigration, we stop foreign workers coming in. Aging is a triumph of development, as I think Mr. Chen Xiaomao did. But is it so simple? We'll all get old one day, and we will need healthcare and support one day. Hopefully later rather than earlier. But can we solve this problem with re-employed retirees becoming caregivers in old folks' homes? Can one child look after 2 elderly parents, whether financially or physically? Is it sustainable? Is it fair? So that's the first group I worry about when looking at the demographic trends. The second group is the low-income Singaporeans. They aspire to a higher income and to a better life, as do all of us. And the government is also doing our best to help them through better pay and upgraded skills, through workfare and all our productivity schemes, through vouchers, GST vouchers and YouSave and many other schemes to cope with the cost of living, through ComCare, MediFund, to provide for families and children. But the best way to help them is to create opportunities for them. Opportunities for better jobs, opportunities for earning more, opportunities to live dignified and fulfilling lives. And they need good jobs. And they don't want handouts. In fact, they prefer to stand on their own feet, learn a new skill, and provide for themselves, as Mr. Zainal Sapari and Mr. Zainuddin reminded us. But to do this, we have to be able to have a pie which is expanding, and the low-income people cannot be burdened heavily looking after senior citizens and old folks at home. Low-wage workers do fear competition from foreigners, but they also benefit from a controlled inflow of foreign workers, because With a controlled inflow, the company has a mix. The foreign worker lowers their costs. Company is viable. It hires the Singaporeans. Otherwise, if they close, it's not the foreign worker who has a problem. He goes home. But it's a Singaporean who's lost his job. And the employer, the SME boss, who's lost his business. As Mr. Inderjit Singh vividly reminded the House. So that's the second group we worry about. The third group are young Singaporeans. Young today and young not yet born. Because we have a responsibility to the Singaporeans to be born. They have many different aspirations. You've heard some of them as MPs have spoken over the last few days. Iswaran talked about Khoo Xue Ni, who wants to become a forensic pathologist. Grace Fu talked about Joel Ng, who wants to become a cartoonist. Baey Yam Keng talked about hawkerpreneurs, who have a vision and a dream and a passion. And you see many others there are many others like them, and today published a population supplement last year, talking about people in law, in social service, people who want to grow their hearts and souls, who actualize themselves. And I see them. In my constituency, young people from the Poly, Nanyang Poly, come to help me do community work. Clean up, paint, tidy up rental flats. They don't have to do it. It's community engagement. They get satisfaction. I think the people who are helped are very, very pleased. I see other young people. I was at Zion Riverside Hawker Center one evening and ran into a bunch of them. Turned out to be SUTD students. Full of life. They were from the Rotaract Club on an orientation and bonding camp. Passionate about their education, passionate about what they are going to do next in Singapore, looking forward to boundless opportunities. When you are young, all possibilities are open. And it's a marvelous feeling. And we have a responsibility to them to make sure they have those opportunities in Singapore. They want fulfilling, well-paying jobs. That's not so surprising. But they also would like an exciting, dynamic city, space to pursue diverse interests, and the opportunity to go and change Singapore and change the world. We've invested heavily in them, developing their potential, especially through education, so they can thrive in many places, not just in Singapore. We've educated them, so many of them are going to come out as PMETs, professionals, managers, executives, technical staff. Educating them as PMETs is not so hard. Finding PMET jobs for them to do to match their education is not so easy. And in many countries, people come out as PMETs and end up in unskilled jobs because the jobs are not there. It happens in China, happens in Europe, happens in America. We are going to have 2/3 of our young people PMETs. Who will be the complement working with them? Some of them will be other Singaporeans, but if you just go on that balance, it's not going to work. You have to complement them with others who can work with them, and that means foreign workers to do jobs, whether it's construction, whether it's in as a domestic maid, whether it's in manufacturing, jobs where we don't have Singaporeans, and jobs where Singaporeans have graduated out of. So, we need to do this for Singaporeans' future, for the young people's future, to have a city which has opportunities and buzz, to be forward-looking, to be on the move. We have Singaporeans all over the world. I think from the last number, it's about 200,000 now, at our best estimate, who are overseas. Many of them are children of parents who are still in Singapore. If you ask around, look around your constituencies, your grassroots, your friends, you will know that many of them have got children living and working and studying overseas. So, they are part of our global community. It's fine. But if Singapore sputters, stagnates, and if we become a giant retirement home, then our young with nothing to look forward to here, they will move, as Arthur Fong has pointed out. And the 2 old folks will be empty nests at home. And that's happened in many countries where the opportunities are not there, people have moved. The Irish used to have that happen to them. The Greeks have many young people who have gone all over Europe. I think it'll be very sad if that happens to Singapore. So, for the sake of the young, for the sake of their futures, we have to think what sort of Singapore we want to see beyond the immediate, beyond the here and now. So, getting our population policy right is important to looking after these longer-term needs of Singaporeans. Having resources, having caregivers to help the elderly, uplifting the low income, who are the hardest hit by stagnation, creating opportunities and hope for our young so that they're anchored here. In other words, all this discussion is about our people, our children, our future. And that's why we have to deal with the immediate problems, infrastructure and so on, and the long-term population issues together to create the most promising future for Singaporeans. The motion, as amended by Mr. Liang Eng Hwa, makes this quite clear, what it is which we're asking Parliament to decide. It sets the objective to maintain a strong Singaporean core by encouraging more Singaporeans to get married and have children, and to supplement this with a calibrated pace of immigration to prevent our citizen population from shrinking. The motion also lays out the priorities and approaches which a government should take to resolve the current strains on the infrastructure, particularly transport, to plan and develop our infrastructure for the future ahead of demand, to make sure that the benefits from our population policies flow to Singaporeans. The motion also sets out what we propose to do between now and 2020 and beyond 2020. It's 2 clear phases, because between now and 2020, we have some clearer idea of what the world will be like. Beyond 2020, we have to wait and see. So between now and 2020, we are slowing down the inflow significantly, and we expect to slow down growth significantly. We are reducing the intake of foreign workers. We are moderating the inflow of new citizens and immigrants to top up the population. We are maintaining the permanent residence numbers at about the present size, 500,000 or so. And in my judgment, this is the most viable path for Singapore to balance our different objectives, to slow down our aging, to make up for the shortfall in our babies, and at the same time to keep our economy healthy and create jobs and push companies to upgrade. It's a significant move, it's a calibrated move. I think this is a judicious thing to do. There's a saying attributed to Lao Tzu. In Chinese, it says, 治大国若烹小鲜. To govern a great nation as you would cook a small fish. In other words, very carefully, gently, don't overdo it, you may ruin it. And I think that we cannot overdo things. This is what is judicious, and I think this is what is workable. Beyond 2020, in the next decade to 2030, things are much more uncertain and open. We don't have 2020 vision of what is going to happen there. The opposition laughs at us why we don't have 2020 foresight. Nobody knows what's going to happen in 2030. Even in 2020, you cannot be sure. How will the world be? How will Singapore be? What will we need to do? It will depend on many things, on our TFR, how much progress we make in restructuring, on the global situation, what happens in the world around us. Is it peace? Is it war? Is it prosperity? Is it a recession or depression or worse? And therefore, we cannot decide on a population trajectory beyond 2020. That has to be left to a future government and future Singaporeans to decide. And in particular, especially, we are not deciding on a population of 6.9 million for 2030 now. And the white paper actually made that clear, but the number got taken out of context and it took on a life of its own. 6.9 million is not a population target. It's a basis for us to plan our infrastructure for the long term. Because we need to build ahead of demand and give ourselves options for the future and buffer. And we have to start building now, and we cannot push it off to the future. If you want a new housing estate, if you want new train lines, it takes many years to build, and once completed, it's going to be there for many, many more years. So beyond 2020, things are still vague, uncertain. And therefore, nearer 2020, we will review the population projections and our policies again. And then we can decide how much further we should slow down in that next decade. To reduce the workforce growth to 1%, which is what the white paper projects, or to cut even further. The more babies we have, the faster we raise productivity, of course, the fewer foreign workers we need. We know that. We have to work hard at it, but we will have to wait and see how things turn out. All these are clearly set out in the amended motion, and I hope that this reassures many MPs that it is a wise thing for the government and for Singapore to do. Many MPs have asked, where are we heading ultimately? What is the maximum population which Singapore can hold? Not just 2030, but in the long term, forever, beyond 2030. What is the final number? Do we see the population growing indefinitely? No. The island is finite. We can reclaim, we'll have another few hundreds, or another 100 square kilometers, 10,000 hectares, possibly. But reclamation doesn't push my international boundary. And even if I went all the way up to my international boundary and filled up Raffles Lighthouse, that's just that, and it will fill up. So it's finite. So eventually we must reach zero population growth. Already the white paper projects slower growth to 2020 in the population, and even slower growth beyond 2020 in the decade beyond that. Eventually we will reach zero population growth. When? Where? Time will tell. It depends on our physical limits, but it also depends on our circumstances and on the attitudes of future generations of Singaporeans, what they choose. If you look at the resident population, it's easier to tell what will happen, because resident population, we can roughly estimate how many babies we are likely to get at the most optimistic calculation, and what we think is a sustainable rate of inflow of new citizens. Now, 3.8 million of resident population, citizens and PRs, and if you go by the white paper as projections, it will stabilize at most 4.2, 4.4 million eventually. That's it. After that, it's flat. And we will have a population pyramid, we hope, which is about a cylinder. Balanced between the old and the young, and not overbalanced with a very heavy bulge of old people supported by a very narrow neck of younger Singaporeans. So the resident population is going to stabilize. So that means the non-resident population will also eventually have to level off, because otherwise we'll have more and more non-residents per Singaporean. And I don't think that is acceptable, as many MPs have pointed out. It's what the Gulf states accept, and they have ratios of 10 to 1 or maybe even more. People aren't quite sure. But that is not Singapore's model. So what will the total population add up to eventually? In my view, if we look at 2030, I think 6 million will not be enough to meet Singaporeans' needs as our population ages, because we have this problem of the baby boomers and the bulge of aging people moving through the system. But I believe that the total population in 2030, should be significantly below 6.9 million, and beyond 2030, in the very long term, it should not increase beyond that. So the final number should be significantly below 6.9 million. That's something for future generations to decide. Meanwhile, we should build up our infrastructure ahead of demand so that people don't feel the sort of strains which they feel today. Good infrastructure is critical to ensure a high quality of life for Singaporeans as our population grows. All Singaporeans would like to see affordable homes, clean and modern neighborhoods. Families would like to see more parks, more childcare facilities, more integrated townships. The elderly would like to see more senior activity centers, more healthcare facilities. And the young would like fun new developments. Skate youth park, extreme sports, thrilling things, and buzz. Quite a number of MPs have pointed out that the living environment affects TFR. I accept that, I believe that. One reason is that I can see among young people a very, very strong norm now. House first, baby later. Couples want to move into their own flat before they marry and have babies. Even if they are registered, they will wait till the house is ready, which may be 3-4 years from now, before they move in. I think then you have tea ceremony and so on, then you're formally living together, and then we hope the baby will come before very long. So we are ramping up the supply of BTO flats. We hope this will help. I think priority for first-timer parents should help and hopefully will change patterns of behavior. And maybe they'll say, why don't we start a baby and then we can get a flat faster? But this is not just a matter of incentives and rewards. It's really mindsets and values and priorities. And I hope that Singaporeans will make families one of their core priorities and will be flexible when thinking how and when they want to start families and how they can fit their families into their lives. Flexible in their careers, flexible in their aspirations, flexible in their arrangements with parents, with in-laws, with childcare centers. We will help overcome all these structural impediments. But finally, the couples have to want to have the kid. Because otherwise, if the kid is born unwanted, I create more problems. The Ministers Koh Boon Wan and Lui Tak Yew have presented over the last few days our plans for transport and housing. The developments are well underway, and I'm confident we can, with planning, imagination and creativity, transform Singapore. Punggol will be replicated. But there are also many other new towns, each with its own charms. And when I'm on leave in Singapore, I visit and walk along the park connectors to see and to enjoy for myself what we have built. And last December, I took a walk at the Bukit Panjang Park connector, all along the Bukit Timah Expressway, parallel but beautifully planted, nature, well used by residents. Then I went to the Sungai Pangsua Park connector. Open, there's a canal. On the other side, it's a railway line, old railway line, which is going to be a green special neighborhood once we get our plans done. Also very well patronized by the residents. Lots of residents, lots of dogs. All kinds. In fact, there's a special signboard showing all the different kinds of dogs which need to be muzzled. And there were about 20. I didn't meet any of them, but I saw the signboard. So it means that people are using it, people are enjoying it, the quality of life is there. And we can create that quality of life for all our Singaporeans. And we will do that. But it's not just improving the physical environment, it's also strengthening the sense of belonging and place. What Ms. Janice Goh said, not just a livable, but a lovable city. I agree with her. That is what we are trying to build. But love cannot always be built. Love has to blossom. And that means that this needs many, many different people to be involved, to lavish care, attention, passion, to nurture, to develop, to curate, to conserve, and to tell the story. And I think we can do that. Common places, common spaces to bond Singaporeans, whether it's a community club, whether it's a neighborhood parks, whether it's a hawker centers. Places which have old memories and places where we make new ones. Whether it's a Punggol Waterway Kelong Bridge, which is aligned with the old Punggol Road, or the new Dawson Estate in Queenstown, or the National Art Gallery. Icons that make us proud to be Singaporean. The Marina Bay skyline, still new, but I think it's something which we should all be proud of, and can be. Changi Airport. An icon not just because it looks pretty, but because it works well. The government will give extra emphasis to this hardware. But as I said, the government can't do it alone. We can build a house, but only we, the people, can build a home. We can provide the common spaces, but it's up to all of us to nurture the healthy, vibrant communities. We can create the opportunities, but it's up to us, the people, to define who a Singaporean is. And ultimately, our population policy must strengthen our Singapore identity. Almost every MP talked about this. It was not in the white paper, because the white paper focused on the tangible aspects, but it is very much in our thoughts. I met a young lady in Tegi Market last Sunday, and she asked me a very pertinent question. She said, "What is the Singapore core?" So let me share my thoughts. The Singapore core is really made up of people, of us. People who have our families and homes here. People who embrace our values, our ideals, who have sunk roots here, who've given their loyalty to Singapore. For whom, when you say the pledge and you see the helicopter flying past on National Day, it's a special moment. Many will have been living in the heartlands, been to school together. We will share memories and experiences. ESM Go talked about some recently, national service, in this debate, national service, SARS, the global financial crisis, 9/11. Fears as well as joys. People willing to defend our nation, our families and friends, our way of life, because we feel as one together. We share sorrows together, even if it's not our own personal immediate family. When 2 young boys were knocked down in Tampines, we all grieve with Mr. and Mrs. Francis Yap. We celebrate successes together. When our Special Winter Olympics speed skating team did well and came home with a whole of gold, silver and bronze medal, we rejoice. When Nixon Fong, who is a Singaporean IT expert in animation, won an Oscar for a new technique to make 3D animated faces and characters, we celebrate with him. We feel together, and we are in a cause together, committed to create a brighter future for all of us. Many of these people will be our children, or will be children of Singaporeans born and bred here. And we want Singaporeans, please have more children. In fact, please get married and then have more children. To inherit what we have built and to build on what you will inherit. To create a community which can trace its roots back through the generations. And so we have the MNP package. We've tried our best, squeezed our brains dry, put in all the ideas which after testing and talking to people we think will work. But I'm sure there are still further ideas, and we have got to keep on welcoming ideas from all sources and trying to raise our TFR. But not every member of the Singapore core will or has to be born here. Some will be born elsewhere, but have embraced our values and decided to make this their home and nation. Immigrants have been critical to Singapore's success, and over the years many have embraced Singapore's cause and made important contributions to Singapore, being the fiercest defenders of Singapore and the most able propounders of our cause and pushing our story worldwide. Rajaratnam was just one of them. That's how we became a shining red dot. As Mr. Rajaratnam said, and many of you have quoted, being a Singaporean is not a matter of ancestry, it is conviction and choice. I accept that the situation today is different from what it was at independence in the 1960s. The founding generation was brought together by an accident of history at a time of great change. And they were bound together by a common cause of survival and building a nation. And because of them, they built a nation with a distinctive Singaporean identity. So you can recognize a Singaporean. You don't have to wait for him to speak. You don't have to hear him. You just look at him, see how he walks, his body language. There's something about him that says, I know he's one of us. Not in Singapore, but you can be in America, you can be in India, anywhere in the world, he's distinguishable. And therefore, because we are distinguishable and identify with one another like that, it's harder for a new arrival to come in and become like those who were born and bred here. Never quite the same. The accent will be a bit different. Your body language will be a bit different. Over time, the accent maybe will become more like Singlish if you come young, especially. But the first generation has something not quite the same about him. Which is also why he is valuable to us, because he adds something to us, or she adds something to us. And we still need them to strengthen our core, to reinforce our talent pool, and to make lives better for Singaporeans. We expect the new citizens to make the effort to integrate into our community, to commit their loyalty to Singapore. And indeed, there are non-Singaporeans who have lived and worked here, who deeply appreciate what Singapore stands for, and they want to contribute to the Singapore story by being Singaporeans. They have seen the world. They have seen how things work elsewhere. They have seen how Singapore is, and they say, yes, let me make this my home and nation. I say we should have the big heart and the open spirit to welcome such people and help them become Singaporean. Let their children grow up in our schools. Let their children be part of the next generation of Singaporeans. The US has such a philosophy of citizenship. The ideal is the Statue of Liberty and the poem, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to be free. And in fact, they have brought in successive generations of emigres, Irish, Germans, Scandinavians, Polish, Russians, Jews, Asians, and greatly enriched their society. Not without difficulty, not without indigestion sometimes, tensions, but it has made America what it is. It's still not easy, and immigration is a vexed issue today. us against them, they can't get a good immigration law passed in Congress. And as Mr. Obama says, a lot of folks forget that most of us used to be them. And I think sometimes we forget that most of us used to be them. But this is the US's great strength compared to many other countries. Japan is the opposite. Very difficult to absorb immigrants. Even Japanese, people who are partly Japanese, who have lived overseas and came back to Japan, don't find it easy to integrate into their society. They had people who were half Japanese, born of American GI fathers after the war. They couldn't fit in, and they were shipped to live in Brazil, which is a much more mixed and tolerant society. And then the Japanese were short of population. They brought some of them in to live in Japan and try to integrate. It didn't work. In the end, they gave them free aeroplane tickets, one way. Please go back to Brazil and please don't come here again. It's sad, but that is the way the society is. And as one Japanese, who is director of the Japan Immigration Policy Institute, says, America manages to stay vibrant because it attracts people from all over the world. On the other hand, Japan is content to all but shut out people from overseas. So those are two extreme models. We are neither the US nor Japan. The US is a continent. You bring in a few 100,000 of a new ethnic group. There's some they can melt into the population, or there's some corner of America where they can fit in. Singapore is not like that. But Singapore cannot be like Japan either, because otherwise we'll suffer the consequences which Japan is now suffering and which you've heard discussed over the last few days. So we have to be open in a controlled way, and if others accept our values and commit to building a better Singapore for all of us, and can make a contribution and can integrate into our society, then we should accept them as one of our own. Around this Singapore core, our society will need a pool of transient non-residents, people who come to work, live and work here for a time, not to retire, not permanently. They serve Singaporeans, build our flats and MRT lines, take care of our elderly, bring skills and experiences that we ourselves lack. So this is the other aspect of the problem which vexes people, because if the non-residents outnumber the core, then the core asks, are we being diluted? And the young Singaporean, the young girl whom I met in Tegi Market, asked me also this question. I didn't give her such a long explanation, but after a short explanation, she asked a supplementary question. She said, will there be a Singapore core in 2030? So I said, that is the whole aim of this exercise. That's what we are trying to achieve. And if your generation have more children, because she's teenage now, by 2030 she will be well in childbearing age, then I think it'll be easier for us to have a core. There's a lot of discussion over the percentage. If you go to 6.9 million, then only 55% will be citizens. And is that enough? And I think the numbers do matter. And we will track and control the numbers of non-Singaporeans and the inflow of immigrants so that we are not overwhelmed just by the sheer flood of people coming in. But whether the core is strong or not and how the transients fit in also depends on the role which the different groups play in Singapore, how they fit into our society. For example, if a big group of the transients are construction workers, which is a fact today, I think we have about 250 or 300,000 construction workers, here temporarily for a project, to do something for us, I don't think that that will weaken the Singapore core. They are here, they do a job, we are grateful to them, the job is done, they go home. Provided we can house them and transport them suitably, and provided that the numbers don't cause problems in our housing estates or in our public transport. If we can manage that, this is a transient population. We are not expecting you to integrate, we are just you are doing a job, and we are grateful for what you are doing for us. So we will watch the numbers, but the Singapore call is not just about the numbers, it's about the spirit. And when I talked about the spirit earlier, and if the spirit is strong, we can manage. And I think it's critical to imbue the younger Singaporeans with the Singapore spirit. We will always put Singaporeans first and make sure that the benefits of our population and our population policies flow to Singaporeans. First of all, in our society, we make sure that Singaporeans are clearly in the majority so that our identity is not diluted by new arrivals. Secondly, in our policies, treating Singaporeans better than non-Singaporeans, especially when it comes to healthcare, education and housing. And thirdly, in our workforce, giving Singaporeans every opportunity to upgrade and take up good jobs and enjoy fair and equal treatment from employers. And I know there are grouses. I heard Professor Eugene Tan talk about his specific issues, and Mr. Patrick Tay raised this also from a union point of view, but we will make sure that Singaporeans are fairly treated. It has to be so, and it will always be so, because the government is elected by Singaporeans and responsible to Singaporeans. But let me add also that at the same time, Singaporeans cannot afford to be just here for the ride, passengers. We are not an oil state where citizens can live on the oil wealth and non-citizens do the work. For Singapore to thrive, we Singaporeans must always stay lean and hungry. If we lose our drive, we will lose out. Mr. Teo Siong Seng, Mr. Liang Eng Hua, and others talked about this, but I would like to underline this point, that there will be privilege to be a Singaporean. It's a special status, which we should be proud of, but we should not think of it as a perk. It's also a responsibility, because we are not just the beneficiaries of the country's success. We also need to be the architects and the builders of our future success. So we've got to fulfill our duties as citizens, defend our country and fellow Singaporeans against danger, especially if you're an NS-man in the SAF or the home team. Help one another to build a strong community and work together to help Singapore succeed. If we retain this spirit and work together, we can create a much better tomorrow for our children. And that's my promise to all Singaporeans. You are at the heart of all of our policies. You are the reason why my team and I entered politics, to work for a better Singapore, to work for Singaporeans. And we want Singapore to do well so that Singaporeans can do well. This conversation on population doesn't end today. Based on the public views and based on the MP's speeches, I think it's clear that there are at least 3 areas which we need to talk about further. Further meaning not just over the next few months, but over the next few years. First, marriage and procreation. What more can we do to encourage Singaporeans to have more babies? Secondly, economy. How to strike that balance between a vibrant economy and our other objectives? How do we restructure our economy to rely less on foreigners? How do we benefit Singaporeans more through economic growth, especially beyond 2020 when the economy is going to be slower? Thirdly, the question of identity. How do we strengthen Singaporean identity even as we keep our society open? I think these are deep questions. They are important ones for us, and we will have to continue to discuss them, and I encourage Singaporeans to continue to discuss them over the next few years, including in our Singapore conversation. We are all in this together, as Senior Minister ESM Goh reminded us. This is an issue not just for the government or the PAP, but for all Singaporeans, including all political parties. And we have to go beyond the rhetoric to develop actual plans that address our challenges and improve our lives. And I ask for your support in doing this. If we make the right choices, our future is bright. We are in a strong position with a high international standing. We've overcome long odds before with creativity and fortitude. In our darkest days after separation in 1965, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew vowed to Singaporeans, 10 years from now, this will be a metropolis. Never fear. And we did it. Together we built a nation. So never fear. We can build an even better Singapore for all Singaporeans. Madam Speaker, I support the amended motion.